Good question. Let's just say, let's just start with actually let's start with the losers. Let's start with the Miami Heat. We'll give Denver all their praise throughout the entirety of the show. But with this Miami Heat team, they're an
Ooh,
eighth seed.
you sure I'm gonna give them praise?
Oh, you might not because you just lost a bunch of bets, but I'll give them their praise. Second eighth seed in NBA history to be able to make it to the NBA Finals. We've talked about it consistently. Spoelstra being one of the top coaches in the NBA. This team in general, we talked about it again with this team along with Boston and Denver as being some of the most cohesive, and even the Warriors. But at the time, they weren't one of the teams in the conference finals. But we talked about with Boston and Denver as one of the most cohesive teams in the NBA at this moment. And despite the fact that they did lose in five, I mean, it's a team that you got to give a lot of credit to. It's a team that you've got to put a lot of respect on. Jimmy Butler going out there having a legendary postseason performance. I think the big questions come along of what do you do with some of those role players that help the team make it to the NBA Finals. Caleb Martin was a great player, but he lacked the confidence and the ability to make big plays down the stretch. Same thing with Strauss. Same thing with Gabe Vincent. It's a great. We didn't. I remember correctly. We didn't see Hero tonight, even though he was ready to suit up. Um, but just in general, I mean, this is a Miami team that has a lot to be happy about, especially because they were an eighth seed, who was, I mean, if I remember correctly, almost eliminated in the play-in tournament against Toronto. But again, they were able to overcome that. They were able to win. And in the NBA Finals, they lose in five, but they still had a hell of a season and as the Eastern Conference champions.
Okay, I don't know if they got much to be happy about because I really think this. I know they lost in five, but I'm pulling up if you can just give me a sec, the Nuggets game logs throughout the playoffs, and man, this Heat team, I know they lost in five, but they played the Nuggets really well. They held yeah, like the Nuggets really didn't explode this playoffs. Like the most they scored against this Heat team was 109. So I guess you're right. They do have something to be happy about, but it's like, man, my biggest takeaway was like throughout the series, kind of staying on this Heat team was this Heat team coming into this finals run was red hot from deep. I don't remember the stats off the top of my head, but Kate, remember it was like this Heat team was shooting like 39% from deep. They were like the 27th ranked team from behind the arc in the regular season, and they jumped from first heading into this playoffs. And then just going through this 3-game stretch. Game 3 at home, 31% from three. Strus puts up 3 points, Vincent 7 points. Game 4 at home, back against the wall. Strus 0 points, Vincent 2 points. Game 5, they shot 25% from three, and they came so close to this taking down this Nuggets team, losing by what it was like 6 points, but it was a 1-point game all the way till the end. Let me pull up this box score real quick. Yeah. Strus had an all right game, but Gabe Vincent completely disappeared. He finally got less minutes, 22 minutes. Caleb Martin logging some more minutes tonight. But my biggest takeaway, Cade, the stars are gonna show up for the most part. Unless your name's Joel Embiid or James Harden, but for the most part, the stars are gonna show up, and it's gonna come down to the role players. The Miami Heat role players, no showed too many times this series. I'll get to Jimmy Butler in a second. Don't worry, Jimmy deserves. There's lots to break down here, but shout out to Bruce Brown, who. Kate, do you remember where he started his career? I want to say I don't think it was in Brooklyn, right?
Oh,
Do you think if you could fact check me real quick?
yeah.
But when he was on Brooklyn, this dude he was like almost a point forward for them. Kind of like crashing the boards, shooting threes. Denver signs into a 1-year deal. And this guy is so good. Like he's so impactful that he has to close out the fourth quarter. MPJ, who was having a great game but a poor series, kind of a little bit of a defensive liability. And Mike Malone, shout out to Mike Malone, deciding to go with Bruce Brown at the end right there. I know I'm getting off Miami, sorry, Kate, but Bruce Brown, he pretty much won the finals for them with on that putback layup or put back, it was a putback layup. I'm pretty sure. I have it up right here. They are down. Yeah, they're down 1 point. Jamal misses a jump shot, and then Bruce Brown puts them up 2. And then a couple possessions later, he ices the game with 2 free throws. Shout out to Bruce Brown, who's had a kind of a crazy journey, but not the best shooter, but he's one of those hustle players that you just want on your team off the bench. We saw this Denver team just their bench kind of just shine. We saw Christian Braun game, a veteran, in college, and that experience kind of just translated. Moment wasn't too big for him. And I think it was game 3. And then Aaron Gordon, didn't really work out. But as a number 3, he worked out well. He had 27 points game 4, and now it was Bruce Brown coming up big for them. Okay, did Bruce Brown start off with Brooklyn though? I don't think he did, right?
No, he started off with Detroit, then he went over to Brooklyn.
You're right, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, this dude's been around the league, just hustle player. Kind of, he's not like he's never going to be like the 3rd, 4th best player, but he's just one of those role players you want. I think he's going to get paid nicely this offseason. But that was my biggest takeaway. Just Jokic did his thing. Jamal did his thing for the most part, but it was the role players that really made the Denver Nuggets and broke the Heat because, their role players just didn't show up.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big things that we've emphasized this entire season, especially as the playoffs came around, was the ability to have a deep bench, the ability to have a bench that was able to be consistent game in and game out. And Denver kind of broke that standard because they only really came off with 3 players off the bench this entire postseason. Today being the only real exception is DeAndre Jordan got 3 minutes, but I mean, you can pretty much count those as 3 non-existent minutes for that team. But it's exactly what you're saying is that this team, they had incredibly big role players, whether they were on the court as starters or coming off that bench as Bruce Brown, Christian Braun. It's the biggest thing that I think is a really strange part to me is that this isn't a group of 3 bench players that I think a lot of people were expecting to come off the bench and make a big effort or make a big emphasis by the time the postseason came around or even during the regular season. I mean, maybe that just be the storylines we saw surrounding Jokic and Murray and how good of a duo that's been this entire season. Maybe it's the fact that this team has been so heavily reliant on their starters, but still, I mean, this is a bench and a group of role players that made the difference in this series. I mean, they showed up in the games that they were necessary for. They played good basketball. And I mean, even though there were some close games in there, they still were able to go out there, prove that they were going to be the best bench they were, despite the fact that they were only going off 3-man bench, knowing that players, whether it's starters or bench players, were going to get a lot more minutes than what we consistently see for most NBA teams, since they have a lot more, they put a lot more emphasis in going deep into their bench. But I'll even say this too. That's one of the biggest takeaways from this NBA Finals for me is that it's also just the fact that the Denver Nuggets were able to win the series, but they were able to stay as energetic as possible. They weren't getting gassed. They weren't really putting up those games where you saw this team get tired. And I said one thing that I said going into the series is that Denver having a 9-day break might hurt them a lot more, since it feels like teams that have those longer hiatuses tend to not do too great. And that was definitely not the case. They got the rest they needed, especially because, again, their minutes are so much higher, I feel like, since they were only going off a 3-person bench. But so, I mean, it's crazy to see how well this Denver team played in the in this NBA Finals series. I mean, when we were talking about Denver sweeping the Lakers and Miami possibly having the opportunity to sweep the Celtics, it really did feel like at that moment that this was the better team to match up against the Denver Nuggets. You look at Bam Adebayo, you thought that he'd be a better matchup than somebody like Al Horford against Jokic. You look at Jimmy Butler, who's actually going to be a little bit more of a defensive pest in regards to somebody like Jamal Murray. And no disrespect to Boston's defense. They've shown year in year out they have one of the top defenses in the league. But for a team like Denver that has the height, that has the length, it really did feel like this matchup against Miami was going to be the one that was going to be a little more difficult and a little more challenging for this Denver team. But they went out there and showed that they could do it in 5. They could go out there. They killed this Miami team realistically, gentleman sweep, and they did it just what felt like so easily with the, again, only loss coming in game 2 in Denver, which came as a surprise. because Miami still did something that no other team this postseason was able to do, and that was win a game in Denver. But that doesn't change the fact that then Denver recollected, recollected 1-2 in Miami. And according to the people of Denver, they were looking for that series to go 5 games because they wanted to be celebrating at home at Ball Arena in Colorado. And that's exactly what they were able to do. So, yeah, I think just my biggest takeaway kind of bouncing off you is the fact that this was only an 8-man team this entire postseason, and they were able to make that work knowing that they were going to get a lot more time, they're going to get a lot more minutes on the court, and they're going to have to do it with a lot less personnel if any of those players were to get injured.
Someone else I think we got to talk about, Cade. Nikola Jokic. I don't know if you want to start with him or Jimmy, the 2 stars, but Jokic 28, 16, and 4 closeout game. I'll pull up the series stats on this dude. It's pretty crazy. 30 points per game, 14 rebounds, 7 assists. I think it's safe to say this was an all-time performance for someone who kind of cemented himself as, I think, the best player in the league. I mean, I know defensively he's not really there, but he bangs. He tries hard on defense. He really can't move that well, but I think it's safe to say it's pretty easily that he's the best player in the league. This was an all-time performance. That Miami defense, if they were giving him the zone, he was able to kick it out to players. Some of those guys, MPJ, couldn't hit anything for his life first 4 games. I think those assist numbers would have been inflated for sure. But Jokic, he was just doing what the defense was giving him. He was catching those passes in the middle of that zone at top of the key. His touch is just like no one else. It's like I don't know who to even compare it to. Maybe like a Tim Duncan touch, where it's like it's so graceful, and it's like if it's not a swish through the net, that ball's gonna find its way through the net. All-time performance from Jokic. I saw some stat before Game 5 where Jokic and Jamal were averaging like 25, 7, and 7. Jamal's stats dropped because he had a poor Game 5, I believe. But these two guys were like this is like the only time, or something crazy, like where it's like this is the only time where 2 players average these kind of numbers. So Jokic just on another level. I mean, this dude, I don't see how the Nuggets can't do it again, really, Cade. I mean, this guy's playing the best basketball that I've seen it. And I'm sorry for downing him, but yeah, Cade, I'm sorry.
Hey, real quick, we gotta highlight this real quick. Austin hopping in from overseas.
Oh, what's up, Austin? 8 a.m.
Geez, I was saying they getting on early, but hey, my guess is that he probably didn't watch too much of the series. But still, I mean, figuring it out 8 a.m. in the morning that the Nuggets won the NBA Finals, fun stuff out there. Austin, hope you're having a fun time out in Europe. But yeah, I mean,
you've been on a crazy world tour.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, hey, he's gonna be he's on a similar world tour that Jokic is about to be on when he gets over to Europe again. Gonna go see his horses. But yeah, I think. What was that last point you hopped on, Danny? Real quick.
I mean, this is just an all-time performance from Jokic. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, he gave what the defense gave him. He was passing the ball. He didn't score the ball as much as people thought he was going to this series, but I mean, nothing else to say really.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, exactly. I mean, I think we emphasize this, or at least I feel like I emphasized this very early on in the NBA Finals, especially after the second round when the Nuggets play the Suns. When Jokic scores a lot of points, this Denver Nuggets team loses. He recognizes, and this team recognizes, that if the offense is strictly going through Nikola Jokic, the other players on this team are being limited and shut down, and that's what results in this team losing. You mentioned that, I mean, you go to the Western Conference Finals and the NBA Finals. Jokic wasn't that top scorer consistently. He put up big numbers, but he was never putting up big points. And that was the difference maker in this series, I think, because, again, the offense never really had to run through Jokic on this offensive, or when it comes to him scoring points. He was able to do it in other ways, like getting assists, like getting rebounds. And the 3 postseason games that Jokic has scored over 40 points this postseason, they're 0-3. It's very obvious that Jokic doesn't need to be – if Jokic isn't scoring, this team is winning. and it shows here. I mean, it was only a 5-point win tonight, 94-89. Wasn't a high scoring game, wasn't anything big. But this entire series, it wasn't really high scoring at all. I think the highest point total is somewhere around 108, something like that. I'll have to double check that real quick. But it wasn't a high scoring series at all. Denver played good basketball when it counted. Jokic played the best basketball. I mean, making sure that he kept his teammates open for offensive assists. And that's all it really came down to, is the ability to play solid defense, which we kind of expected, knowing that this Denver team is a much bigger team than a lot of the other teams Miami has faced, a lot of other, just in general as well, with defenders like Aaron Gordon and, oh my God, who else? KCP, Jokic obviously being a big time defender there. God, who am I?
MPJ,
Jamal.
6'10".
Yeah, MPJ. Yeah, exactly. There we go. MPJ, another big time defender. I think I may have had him as my X factor. I could be wrong there, but yeah, it shows that, I mean, this team was just overall a very underratedly built defensive team. Jokic, yes, I agree. He didn't really necessarily get it done too much on the defensive side. But for him, I mean, his offense was so spectacular that his defense didn't necessarily need to be there consistently in order to make this team win. And that's just the biggest factor I see in this as well, is the fact that Denver's defense played such a big role in this, that they were able to go out there, win a series in 5, without having to put up massive. I mean, you look at tonight's game, 94-89, that feels like a game that you'd see in the 90s, where it's not high scoring. Granted, I feel like during the NBA Finals, you do see scoring go down a little more. Those defensive battles really do start to show up. But still, Denver showed that this team's defense was one of the most underrated aspects of this team, and it showed against a team like Miami, who, I mean, they're a defensive-minded team in themselves when you look at it, but they were able to be so hot from 3. They were able to be so hot just on the offensive side through the first round until the Eastern Conference Finals. And other than game 2, they were shut down completely. And the fact they were shut down completely in Miami says a lot, too. I mean, they lost both games in Miami. It's just, this Denver team is the best team in the NBA. I've said it once, I'll say it again. I told you at the beginning of this series that this is probably going to be the most challenging team that this Miami Heat team is going to see. That was the case. Jimmy Butler had one of the best postseason performances in modern history, at least from what I remember. We mentioned that it seems like it just continues to go on. It hasn't run out yet, and it doesn't look like it's going to run out. It finally hit that brick wall against the Denver Nuggets, and Denver's etched themselves in the history books.
You touched a little bit on Jimmy Butler. Cade, I got to go on my boy Jimmy. Before this series started, 28 points per game, 35% from deep, 9 free throw attempts per game. That's key to me. Basketball Reference hasn't updated game 5 yet, but through the first 4 games, only 5 free throw attempts per game, drops from 9 to 5, 21.8 points per game. That's probably about the same. Yeah, 21 in game 5, 5 for 8 in game 5. If we're gonna play the blame game, I think you gotta give a good chunk of the blame to Jimmy. You're the best player on this team. You lose 2 games at home. You're guaranteeing wins every single game for whatever reason. He never scored over 28 points in a game this finals. And I don't know, when I'm watching game 5, it looked like he was getting the matchup that he wanted every time. Jamal was guarding him every time. They wanted that down low. And I mean, when is he going to develop a 3-point game? I know he's a great number 1, but if they're going under on every single screen, it's like, Jimmy, you just got to work on your 3, right, Cade? I mean, we saw at the end, too late, too soon, or too soon to be too late, whatever the saying is. 13 straight points. He kind of carried them at the end right there. He had those 2 threes and those 3 free throws to actually give them the lead. And then, oh man, what a terrible last shot, Cade. Did you see that last shot?
I didn't know.
24 seconds left on the clock. They're trying to run a play for Duncan Robinson. It looked like it didn't really break down. He didn't get a good look. And then so he gives it back to Jimmy, and Jimmy just chucks up a fadeaway 3. They're like down. I think they were down 3. And 24 seconds left on the shot, or there's like 15 seconds left on the shot clock. Chucks up a 3. It like goes off the backboard. It's like he almost gave up at the end. So for a great defensive game plan that Miami had, like I said, they even though they got blown out, gentlemen swept. They held Miami, or they held Denver to under 109, 110 points throughout the entire series. Denver really never had an offensive explosion, so they kind of held it down defensively, and they just never got that Jimmy Butler game, or those two Jimmy Butler games where he erupts for 40 points, takes 27 shots and makes 18 of them. So I gotta say I'm disappointed in Jimmy. If I'm playing the blame game, I'm gonna give like 25 to 50% to Jimmy. That sounds like a lot. I'm a clump up like 33% to the role players, just because the role players, these are undrafted guys. They did play terrible, and then I got to give some of the blame to Bam, I guess. I don't know, but what's your thoughts on Jimmy, Cade?
I mean, you saw it last year in the Eastern Conference Finals, and Jimmy had a wide open three to pretty much give Miami the series. Missed that. This Miami Heat team is so built along the idea that these role players are going to be able to hit that 3-point shooting, that Jimmy Butler's 3-point shooting isn't necessarily going to be a requirement for him to go into every game and be able to shoot lights out from the three. And I think that's what it came down to, is that because these role players were not playing at the same level they had been in the Eastern Conference Finals and the previous postseason series that they've played, that played a massive role in the ability to actually get their offense going. And it showed this postseason. I mean, again, 111 was the most points scored by a team this NBA Finals, and that was Miami in Game 2 over Denver. That was the only one they won it by 3 points. And as you mentioned, I agree. Denver never got that offensive explosion that was necessary for them to succeed, or at least from what we would think to succeed. But Denver's defense played good enough basketball that they were able to eliminate the role players that were involved and really keep the only scoring happening between Jimmy and Bam. But those two were pretty much out of it. I mean, they didn't really play the way they were expected to play at the beginning of this series, the way they played in the entire postseason.
And then Bam in the first half, 18 points, 8 for 13 from the field, finishes with 20 points. He scored 2 points the second half. He goes 1 for 7 in that second half of Game 5. Man, I'm still not over it, Cade. Man, Miami was so close.
I mean, today they had no excuse. I mean, they led almost the entire game. They gave up the lead late in the game, which was something that we've seen before this Denver team do, where they will be giving up a lead late into a game, especially at home, and they'll find a way to come back and win it. Yeah, I mean, Miami, they've got something. I think this is now, you look at this Miami team, they made it to the NBA Finals. That's fantastic. But I think this is now a point where if you're